1, and you're live.
Good morning, Summa scholars. Welcome to the Daily Summa. Today is May 12th during Eastertide. Good morning, Joe.
Good morning.
Well, I guess we should address the non-being in the room. We didn't do Summa yesterday.
That's right.
So, my fault. And it's classic CK, how it took place. We've kind of got a schedule sort of change, like your new situation and how things have been somewhat different in the past week or two or so. In my mind, I was like, oh, okay, we're now in the old schedule that we had talked about doing because Joe has this new situation. So therefore, the evening Summa is after Vespers. Just out of nowhere, my brain said it's after Vespers that I go over there in the evening because now we can do the full Sabbath. And I was waiting, and then I looked at the phone, and you're like, excuse me, where are you? We do it at 7 p.m., if you guys don't know, on Sunday evening. So the Beaver Galleon did not set sail. The Beaver Galleon did not do whatever it does yesterday. So apologies to whoever might have noticed that. Steve, Haley, and the crew, Poppy. But here we are, page 183, question 16, finishing up Article 3 and going into Article 4. And we have a good Monday. How's Monday treating you, Joe?
It's a Monday.
It's a Monday, yeah. Did you have a pleasant day yesterday?
No.
Well, I was blessed with a pleasant day yesterday. Had a wonderful pub night at the Burnetsky Estates. Yeah.
Sounds like a good time.
It was good times. And then yesterday, wonderful mass, and then good times on the Andrew porch. Aaron came by, Jack came by, and then the guys of the house. And it was pretty much all day on the porch. And Andrew, this is kind of a beautiful thing that happened. So I've been relaxing my schedule at norms as God is leading me more towards learning socializing. Now, someone may say, don't you have experience socializing? Yes, but I've had experience socializing only in crowds that are at a place to see one of my shows or the Saito Tramp shows. But I've never really gone to groups to just hang out. I don't do that. Back in the old life, I would either be with a girl or by myself. And I would not just go hang out with people. And that is happening here in this town. And I'm having to learn to be in a group as just one of the group instead of being in the group as the one who's putting on the show. And that's a big difference. So I've been relaxing some of my efforts because my schedule keeps me isolated in a sense with the Lord, which is perfect and good, and I'm going back to it at some point. But for now, I'm learning this socializing thing, which I learned at the pub night party very greatly, and then yesterday. But here's the thing. I did not get my normal, Sabbath stuff, a steak or all of that. So I was like, what is going to happen today? And I was kind of willing and interested to, all I had was a little sausage and cheese left. I'm like, first of all, I ended up fasting unwantedly during the octave, as you know, because of certain trials. So I was like, all right, well, if that's what I'm doing this Sunday, fine. I'll just ride this thing out, see how it goes. The Beaver Galleon doesn't always sail in the normal way. So that's what was in my mind. I'm sitting out on the porch in the early afternoon or around lunchtime, and I'm having a little sausage and cheese, and I'm like the widow with Elijah, I shall eat this and then have nothing else. Andrew comes out with this big fat steak from the box. And without saying anything, he just cuts me off a huge slab. Like, because his steak was like this big. He cuts me off a big, huge section, not knowing this, and gives it to me. So now I have my normal Sabbath steak, and that was wonderful. And then I'm like, what will I do this evening? Maybe I'll go to a restaurant, which I never do on Sunday. But no, Andrew comes out, Aaron's there, Kevin's there, Jacob, and he comes out with this big strips of sausages, like big sausages, and Jacob starts making kale and food. And next thing I know, there's a whole big plate of food in my lap. And then Jacob says, I have a dike left. That's a Klondike bar for you who aren't following at home. And for a long stretch of my life, I would save Klondike bars for Sabbath. It's like a special Sabbath treat. That was the only time I would ever eat these Klondike bars. So the Lord was just generous. I had my whole Sabbath meal prepared for me by others. I had a Klondike bar. Kevin says, would you like some bourbon? He has a bottle left over from Easter. He goes up and pours me a nice glass of everything just given to me. So the Lord took care of my Sabbath celebrations, which I did not. The only negative thing was not showing up for the Daily Summa. Everything else was beautiful. And so here we are Monday, looking forward to Chesties being open. When does Paul get back?
I'm not sure.
We're missing Paul. It's funny how...
Where's Paul?
Where's Paul? Yeah. It's funny how our group, one of them is gone and you feel it. Yeah. Well, guys, thanks for joining us here on this sleepy Monday morning. I might have hit the snooze a couple times this morning. But I still got up, vigil, morning prayer, started my first pipe, and now we're here at the Galleon to share with all of you lovely people the wisdom of St. Thomas. Let's see if we can zip through this page and see what the Lord has in store. We're going to finish up the I Answer. Actually, I'll start with the beginning of I Answer That from Article 3 and move on to these objections. See if we can figure out what Thomas is talking about in this, the Pontius Pilate question. What is truth? Oh, we're also talking about possibly having our first guest coming up this summer. Just a little preview of coming attractions, folks. We have someone teach probably 2 classes in a row. A guest, an author, a venerable, what do you call it when you're studying to be a priest? You're a seminarian. Yeah, that should be interesting. Someone who knows Latin. Could be good. I may be out of a job. All right, respondio. Bottom of 182, moving up to 183. I answer that. As good has the nature of what is desirable, so truth is related to knowledge. We talked about this many times. You have the cognitive power and the appetitive power in your human nature. Cognitive is the cognition, your mind. Appetitive, appetite, your desiring part. Now, everything in as far as it has being, so far is it knowable. Wherefore, it is said in De Anima 3 that the soul is in some manner all things. We left off at those deep waters. The galleon is sailing over some very deep waters right now, guys, with breaching sperm whales all about. Through the senses and the intellect, the soul is in some manner all things. Remember also, in Thomism, your soul is not in your body is in your soul. The soul is and your spirit are invisible realities apart from united to matter. How all that connects together and how it works is a way deep subject for another time. Let's just move on. And therefore, as good is convertible with being, so is the true. Something must have being for it to engage you as a being, either in your cognitive or appetitive powers. But as good adds to being the notion of desirable, so the true adds relation to the intellect. You can only relate fully to something that is fully true. That is why you have such confusion and a feeling of disassociation with reality. Not because there's something wrong with God and his reality, but there's something wrong with your apprehension of it. This is called concupiscence. Okay, reply to objection 1. Let's see what Thomas has to say to Larry. The true resides in things and in the intellect, as said before. But the true that is in things is convertible with being as to substance, while the true that is in the intellect is convertible with being as manifestation with the manifested. For this belongs to the nature of truth. As has been said already, Article 1. It may, however, be said that being also is in things and in the intellect, as in the true, although truth is primarily in the intellect, while being is primarily in things, and this is so because truth and being differ in idea. Remember that we can make logical distinctions. Truth and being are distinct as idea, but we are one true being. Whatever is true is good, and whatever is good is true, and being is one. But we're making logical distinctions here and how they relate to us. In relation, intellect is in relation, being is in, goodness is in your desiring of the being. Once you see something, first of all, it has to have being for you to even apprehend it at all. Remember what we said about evil. Evil is a non-being. You can apprehend it like the hole in the piece of paper. There's nothing really to apprehend there, except that there's not paper. Also notice the very mystical relation between evil, non-being, and that which is commonly referred to as God. You cannot talk about evil as being because it is not being. And you cannot talk about God because any word that you say of him is a definition, which is a limiting factor, and God is eternal. So just notice how closely these two things work together. Now you're getting into the mystery of the cross. Deep mysteries here, folks. Reply to objection 2. Not being has nothing in itself whereby it can be known, yet it is known insofar as the intellect renders it knowable. Hence, the true is based on being, inasmuch as non-being is a kind of logical being, apprehended, that is, by reason. Hence, the true is based on being, inasmuch as a not being is a kind of logical being, apprehended, that is, by reason. That's very interesting. He's calling it a kind of logical non-being, or a kind of a logical being, because we speak about it as if it is something in our logic, in our reason. We have to speak that way as humans. but keeping in mind that it's not being. We also speak of what God is not, not because he is not, but because he is being as such, ipsum esse. And we can't speak about that because our intellects can't hold the eternal in that way. So we can't speak about evil because it is not, and we can't speak about God because he is all. There's a certain similarity. Reply to objection 3. When it is said that being cannot be apprehended except under the notion of the true, this can be understood in two ways. In the one way, so as to mean that being is not apprehended unless the idea of the true follows apprehension of being, and this is true. In the other way, so as to mean that being cannot be apprehended unless the idea of the true be apprehended also, and this is false. But the true cannot be apprehended unless the idea of being be apprehended also, since being is included in the idea of the true. The case is the same if we compare the intelligible object with being. For being cannot be understood unless being is intelligible. Yet being can be understood while its intelligibility is not understood. Similarly, being, when understood, is true, yet the true is not understood by understanding being. Just because something is, and just because something is intelligible, doesn't mean that you will understand it. Just like what we just read here. Just because everything that we just read is true and good does not mean that your intellect is apprehending every part of it. Similar to the metaphor that Thomas gave of the man walking at a distance. You know there's a man coming, but you don't know which man it is. As soon as you know that it's your friend Joe, then your intellect is able to apprehend that truth. But that truth has always existed, or existed prior to your seeing the man in the distance. That's what Thomas is trying to say. Truth is always apprehendable, but you in particular may not be able to apprehend it. And once I realize that it's Joe, then my appetitive power is enacted, and I have emotions of love and happiness and excitement to be able to be near my friend. So my intellect apprehends it's my friend, then my appetitive power follows with love and warmth. But first is the intellect, then the appetitive power follows, and that's goodness. First comes truth, then comes goodness, and it follows from being. Joe has to be in the first place. But the important point here is to realize that Joe was always good. He was, well, you know. Joe was always good, and Joe was always truly there, and Joe was always completely apprehendable, even though at a distance I couldn't tell that it was Joe. I just knew it was a man. And remember how we say we always toggle back and forth between the knowledge of God and what is absolutely and ultimately true and good, and then our particular human apprehensions of these things. All right, move on to Article 4. Whether God is logically, good. Whether good is logically prior to the truth. There should be a hint in what I've already said, that the appetitive power follows upon the cognitive power. Or as Augustine says, you must know something in order to love it. First, you have to know it in order to love it. There could be mystical experiences in which God infuses you with the Holy Spirit, who is love, and you don't really know. That seems to be a different category of experience, though, and adding too much confusion to our flyover study here. Okay, Larry comes up with objection 1. It seems that good is logically prior to the true. For what is more universal is logically prior, as is evident in physics. But the good is more universal than the true, since the true is a kind of good, namely, of the intellect. Therefore, the good is logically prior to the true. Larry's trying to say that goodness is a true thing, but you can flip it the other way too. True is good. You can flip it the other way too, Larry. We'll see what Thomas says to it. Reply to objection 2, Ralph, up to bat. Ralph says further, good is in things, but the true is in the intellect, composing and dividing, as said in Article 2. But that which is in things is prior to that which is in the intellect, therefore good is logically prior to the true. Objection 3, Shimon. Further, truth is a species of virtue, as is clear from ethics. But virtue is included under good, since, as Augustine says, it is a good quality of the mind. Therefore, good is prior to the true. Well, truth is a species of virtue, if seen from the point of view of virtue. But true is prior to that. We'll see what Thomas has to say. Said contra, on the contrary, what is in more things is prior logically. But the true is in some things wherein good is not, as for instance in mathematics. But true is in some things wherein good, whereas good is not, as for instance in mathematics. Therefore, true is prior to good. I have to admit, I don't know exactly what that means. Good is not in mathematics. It must be your appetitive power.
I think he's just saying that mathematics are a neutral thing, but they are true.
And I see that, but the problem is the elegance of mathematics. People who understand mathematics do have an appetitive draw to it. They see the beauty of it and they desire to experience the elegance and beauty of a proof or something like that. In fact, there are some people who are so enthralled with the beauty of mathematics that they will even destroy relationships in order to pursue their desire to experience the beauty of mathematics. They experience it emotionally, is what I'm getting at. But perhaps that's not what Thomas meant fully. You Thomas watching, please tell your thoughts in the, what do you call those things?
Comments.
Comments, yes. By the way, like and subscribe. And the page turning is sponsored by craigkinsey.locals.com. You can go to craigkinsey.locals.com and sign up. That's CRAIGKINSEY.locals.com. I answer that. Let's hear the logical reply from Thomas, as my appetitive desire finishes that coffee there. It's so good having someone mow this early in the morning. It's good stuff. I answer that. Although the good and the true are convertible with being as to the suppositum, yet they differ logically. And in this manner, the true, speaking absolutely, is prior to good, as appears for two reasons. Why the suppositum? Because you're going to have your appetitive, desiring nature drawn to an actual instantiation of a form. You don't sit around going, ooh, I love horsiness. Ooh, I love humanness. You love a particular horse. You love a particular human. The appetitive power is enacted when the form is in a suppositum, in a particular manifestation of coffee. I don't sit around, I don't wake up in the morning and going, oh, coffeeness. I wake up in the morning saying, I want a cup of coffee. First, because the true is more closely related to being than is good. Okay. For the true regards being itself simply and immediately, while the nature of good follows from being, insofar as being is in some way perfect, and thus it is desirable. Remember what perfect means, folks? It's the thing we talked about with our fire, our campfire. We're not talking about perfect, like God is perfect. We're talking about a thing fulfilling its nature, its essence being manifested in a nature that is concomitant with its essence. So if I have a good cup of coffee, That means that it's not over extracted. There wasn't too little beans. There wasn't too much beans. The temperature is right. My perfect amount of coffee is in. Once it reaches perfection, then your appetite is enacted and enjoys it. So goodness is secondary in your experience. Second, it is evident from the fact that knowledge naturally precedes appetite. Hence, since the true regards knowledge, but the good regards the appetite, the true must be prior in idea to the good. He said prior in idea. Perhaps he's addressing what I'd said earlier with God infusing goodness and love in you in something like the baptism in the Holy Spirit. I remember my experience in that little prayer meeting with Brian Morgan, and I think her name was Al, actually, in which Brian touched my forehead. I had no idea what was going on. I knew nothing. No real scripture knowledge. Didn't grow up in religion. And boom, had to lay down on the couch from an overwhelming outpouring of love and goodness and a love of God who I did not know and at all in the intellect. So the true must be prior in idea to the good. I had an idea of God, and then that idea begins to grow as you study, pray, meditate. That's why we're doing this here. Daily Summa, daily having our head in the things of God so that God may take that straw, these little disparate pieces of straw, and they finally start connecting. Just like you take wood from out of the woods to build your campfire when you're out camping. You're pulling out these pieces of wood that seem like they are nothing, little pieces of kindling, and then you begin to collect them into the fire pit and they begin to form in such a way as is conducive to starting a fire, combustion, airflow. That's what's happening here in the Daily Summa. As we began this, and if you're just beginning, you're going to be just picking up pieces of straw that have no real connection. But the further we continue in this and the further you persevere in it, your mind will begin to make connections. The pieces of wood, the pieces of straw will begin to be placed together. And you'll have these little moments of, oh yeah, oh, I see how that connects. You're still not on fire yet. You're still just placing dead wood, dead straw together. But at some point, when you least expect it, the Holy Spirit will take all these things and catch them on fire. And that will enact a repetitive power of love, a transcendent love that goes beyond this world. And then you'll begin your journey out of Mitzrayim, your journey out of Egypt into the land of the true, the good, and the beautiful, the transcendental, and the home of your Father, your true Father, and your true lover, the divine marriage. Step by step, little by little. Reply to objection 1. The will and the intellect mutually include one another. For the intellect understands the will, and the will wills the intellect to understand. Beautifully put. You have a relationship within yourself. That is because you are made in the image and likeness of the deity. You're made in the image of the deity, and Christ is restoring the likeness, the broken likeness, which happens through study, asceticism, and prayer. But know that you have a relationship within yourself, and that relationship is broken. That's why God is manifesting in the outside world what is happening to you in your inner world that you can't see because you're too close to it. So he has to make in the outside world images like Egypt, Jews, Israel. He chooses Israel not because the Jewish people are somehow more smart and better than the rest of us. It's because he chose a people to start manifesting these interior realities in the outside world so that you could begin to see. As St. Paul said, these things are done to us, done for examples. All the things that happened to the Jews are done to us as examples so we might see. So just as Egypt enslaved Israel, beat them, whipped them in order to have them work and produce, so also you are doing that to yourself right now. When you do something wrong, when you do something that's not perfect, when you have a cup of coffee and you don't enjoy it like you have before, you begin to beat yourself interiorly. I've even heard people do this. I remember distinctly hearing someone in the kitchen, and I was in the living room, and I heard them out loud beating themselves for not doing things right. I'm stupid. That was stupid. You're sort of a golem type thing. That's what Tolkien was trying to make manifest and show. And that's what's made manifest in the history of Israel with Egypt and also Babylonian captivities, Persian captivity, Greek captivity, and the final Roman captivity. You are held captive by yourself. You are held captive by your own intellect. When you can't see something as true, you make mistakes in life. Then that causes you tsuris, causes you your appetitive power to suffer. And then you begin to beat yourself and you suffer even more. So you just have to see that that everything that's in Scripture that happened with Israel is a macrocosm or an exterior manifestation of what's going on in your soul. So let's read this. The will and the intellect mutually include one another. This would be the preternatural human. This would be the male and female aspect. Male being intellect, female being the appetitive. They're mutually include one another. They are united in a loving embrace. In concupiscence, there's a divorce. For the intellect understands the will. That would be the man understanding the woman. And the will wills the intellect to understand. The woman desires that the man should enter into her. She's freely open. She wills for the will to understand. This is a beautiful little sentence explaining wholeness in humanity. And that wholeness has been broken, and therefore we have confusion, and that's why we have this big long book, and we have to wake up at 7 in the morning or 5 in the morning and sit here in front of you all and talk about this stuff. Okay, so then, among things directed to the object of the will are comprised also those that belong to the intellect, and conversely, yin yang, that which is in the intellect is loosed, is what's a proper word I could use? Injected into the will. That which is in the intellect is released into the will. The will receives it. So then among things directed to the object of the will are comprised also those that belong to the intellect, and conversely, that which is in your will is affecting your intellect. The woman is affecting the way you make decisions. When these things are disordered in a marriage, things become horrible. And when these things are misdirected in you, they become horrible. And when they're misdirected in a society, they become horrible. The society's desire for pleasure and power twists the intellect seed. And then you have things like man is a woman is a man, and all that stuff. It's confusion. The two are not understanding each other. Whence, in the order of things desirable, good stands as the universal, and the true as the particular. The true is looking at particular things. The will is more universally loving. This is also a beautiful description of the difference between male and female. Male is going to, generally speaking, humans love to take an exception and then say there can be no truth because you're idiots. But The male has the tendency to be directed towards a particular. The female has the tendency to absorb and embrace the universal. That's why when the woman goes haywire sexually, she goes way haywire. Starts accepting all the snacks, embracing all the particulars. Whereas in the order of intelligible things, the converse is the case. What is that the Jeremiah says, the prophet Jeremiah, about Israel? You became a whore. You became a she-camel, snorting in the wind and running off into the desert after all your lovers. Whereas in the order of intelligible things, the converse is the case. From the fact, then, that the true is a kind of good, it follows that the good is prior in the order of things desirable, but not that it is prior absolutely. These things are hard to explain because ultimately everything's in God, and in God is true and good as one. So all these things are a lot of logical distinctions and hard to understand. In my opinion, there may be some very, very smart Dominicans who can pick this thing all apart and show exactly what it was. And then you're going to watch the demonstration, as Blaise Pascal says, the problem with the philosophy. And remember, Blaise Pascal is a philosopher, but he does aphorisms, much like Nietzsche. That's why Nietzsche is very powerful. If Nietzsche said his philosophy with this boring, like, and then this follows this, and that is that, no one would give a darn. But he was smart. He did it with aphorisms. And so did Blaise Pascal. And Blaise Pascal says the problem with philosophy is you're held in thrall while the demonstration is happening. But as soon as you walk away, you forget what you just saw and all the logic, and it doesn't inflame you. It's like if Poppy, our friend Poppy Jr., were to draw out on a chalkboard how dance works. He can do that. This step here, this foot here, this is that. Here's what you should be thinking. And it might be fun to kind of watch him do that on a chalkboard, but I don't know how many dates you're going to get. But if you go out and dance with a woman, boom. I talked to a woman the other day who said she didn't really like a guy until she danced with him. So just remember that, guys. This is all straw. The point is not that you abandon it. It's that you go out into the woods and collect the straw and build your little campfire and wait for the Holy Spirit to fall, as he did with Elijah on the sacrifice with the prophets of Baal. Reply to objection 2. A thing is prior logically insofar as it is prior to the intellect. Now, the intellect apprehends primarily being itself. Second, it apprehends that it understands being. And third, it apprehends that it desires being. Hence, the idea of being is first. That of truth, second. Remember, he said the idea. The idea of being is first. The idea of truth is second. And the idea of good third, though good is in things. It's all one. Adonai Echad, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. But we are making logical distinctions and also talking about how our human nature acts. But just remember that there's a divorce, that you have concupiscence, and that Christ is restoring it through a very, very unexpected way, through this whole cross thing. And the unexpected connection of pleasure and pain. I will repeat, the unexpected connection of pleasure and pain. Reply to objection 3. Child can't understand that. Child pleasure is just cotton candy. When you get older, like the guys in my band who would go to the Thai restaurant, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The heat, you know what I'm talking about? You get to choose how hot your meal is. You know what I'm talking about? Thai restaurant. Guys in my band, 5. Sitting there eating, sweating, pain. Why? Kids don't do that. Think about it. Reply to objection 3. The virtue which is called truth is not truth in general, but a kind of truth according to which man shows himself in deed and word as he really is. But truth, as applied to life, is used in a particular sense, inasmuch as a man fulfills in his life that to which he is ordained by the divine intellect. As it has been said that truth exists in other things, whereas the truth of justice is found in man as he fulfills his duty to his neighbor as ordered by law. Hence, we cannot argue from these particular truths to general truths. The reason we have law, the reason the Torah was given is because of concupiscence, because of this divorce that's in you. You can't see what is true and good. But Abraham, our father in faith, had loving kindness. Therefore, he had no need of Torah. Torah is given for lawbreakers. That is also why the church in the 60s and all that, this pastoral thing that everyone complains about, that we got so lax. It's true. But the reason they did that is because the ideal is that you don't have to impose laws on people. When I say stuff like you should be doing the divine office, you should be fasting on Wednesday and Friday, you should be praying, I use that word should. The church doesn't impose that on you because she's hoping that you can't impose it on that. When God gave the Torah to the Jews, he was not wanting to do that. That's not the ideal. It's a capitulation to human weakness. Just like kings, just like castles and big cathedrals, we should be able to see as Enoch saw. Enoch had no cathedrals, Enoch had no Torah, Enoch walked with God. Abraham lived in a tent as a traveling, like a Bedouin, traveling vagabond. He had the true temple. You should be able to see these things, but you don't. So the church has to impose a certain amount of restrictions. You at least have to come to church on Sunday. But guys, come on, these are the very, very least things. And just picture the Blessed Mother. You have to woo somebody into doing all these things. I use the word should. You should be praying. You should be doing divine office. You should. But if the person's not wooed into loving in this way, then they're not loving. Therefore, you can't impose a rule on them. So it's up to you. It's your choice. Do what thou wilt. As St. John of the Cross says, how are we using our time? John of the Cross goes through this long explication and then explanation of what happens in the higher levels of prayer, how the Lord overwhelms you, the blisses, the ecstasies, the freedom. And then he says, how are we using our time? Consider these things. This is all straw. Go and pray. Good morning, everybody, and have a good day. See you tomorrow. We're done.